This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The World Health Organization calls for effective and fair distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. African countries seek equal access to COVID-19 vaccines. And a Dutch appeals court finds Shell's Nigerian subsidiary responsible for oil leaks. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Kenya's economy slumps into first recession in 20 years in the third quarter of 2020. And in sports, Court of Arbitration for Sport reinstates banned Ahmad as CAF president. Welcome to the program. Now, the World Health Organization is warning countries against hoarding COVID-19 vaccines. This comes after the European Commission agreed to control exports of coronavirus vaccines from the EU to ensure its own supplies. Astatal has more.
Since the start of the pandemic, the WHO has pushed for equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. This led to the creation of COVAX. Co-led by the WHO, it looks to ensure fair access to these vaccines for poor and lower middle income countries. But now there are worries that rich countries are hoarding COVID-19 vaccines.
If we hoard vaccines and if we're not sharing, there will be three major problems. One, I said it will be a catastrophic moral failure. And two, it keeps the pandemic burning. And three, very slow global economic recovery. So it's morally wrong in terms of arresting the pandemic. It wouldn't help, and it wouldn't also bring livelihoods back. Is that what we want? So it's our choice. And I hope we will choose the right things.
WHO authorities are speaking out following plans by the European Commission to control exports of COVID-19 vaccines from the EU, including the UK. The move looks to ensure that the EU has supplies of the coronavirus vaccines.
There are multiple elements. When you get a medicine or you get a vaccine, you're getting products that are coming from many places in the world. So it's not, let's say it's not helpful to have any country at this stage putting export bans or barriers that will not allow for the free movement of the necessary ingredients that will make vaccines, diagnostics, and other medicines available to all the world.
The lack of fair access to COVID-19 vaccines is having an effect on health workers globally. The head of the WHO's Health Emergencies Program said that health workers in poor countries had expressed concerns over their ability to receive the coronavirus vaccines.
So I think we need to step back and reflect upon our brave colleagues and where they stand today and what we're going to do about that. And we need to reflect on that. We are all desperate. Everyone is desperate. Governments are desperate to service the needs of their citizens. That's their mandate. But we all need to say, would I put a vaccine in my arm today if I thought that a health worker in the South would not get a vaccine today? And I think we all need to examine our own consciences and then tell our political leaders and others what we want them to do.
As well as warning against vaccine hoarding, the WHO announced its hopes to give the AstraZeneca Oxford University vaccine emergency use listing. It is also set to meet manufacturers of Russia's vaccine, as well as visit vaccine facilities in China. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, let's get more on that story now. Rehat Desai, founder of the People's Vaccine Campaign, tells us more now on COVID-19 vaccines. Rehad, what are your thoughts on these allegations that rich countries are in effect hoarding COVID-19 vaccines?
Yeah, firstly, I'm one of the founding members of the People's Vaccine Campaign in South Africa. Yes, we've seen the development of vaccine, what they call vaccine nationalism, people ordering more than they need to hedge their bets on, successful candidates for this vaccine. Now, the key problem here is global demand or global supply does not meet global demand in any shape or form. We've got to use what legislation in our specific countries, particularly those in the global north, where we have successful vaccine candidates already been approved by the EU and America and other countries. The government needs to step in to do everything within their legal powers to ramp up production. This is a global threat. It requires a global solution. No one is safe until everybody is safe. That's our resounding message from the People's Vaccine Campaign. Free the vaccine, take it out of the control of the big pharmaceutical companies so we can manufacture this vaccine wherever it is humanly possible at this moment in time. Not to do that will cost tens of millions of lives.
And Rehad, looking
global south.
All right, looking now at the African continent, why is it that the continent is not able to develop its own vaccine?
Well, at the moment, our governments have been found wanting across the continent. South Africa, my country, with perhaps the most developed economy, saw a partnership being entered into by government with a private company to produce vaccines, to ramp up the capacity that we used to have, the production capacity that used to exist in a number of African countries. This was undermined and neglected, and we just handed over the role to the big pharmaceutical companies, and we would import them. There is no time now to waste. It will take a number of years before we're in the position to be able to manufacture from start, on license if required, these vaccines which demand modern technology. They're very modern, they're very new. We need new plants, factories, or to retrofit the factories that we do have in order to be able to do this, and the technological transfer. This means that the World Trade Organization really needs to review its whole approach to life-saving medicines, so these transfers can happen. So globally, we can meet this pressing need for vaccines. This will not be the last big pandemic we face, global pandemic we face, and that means we've got to get busy now. Our government has injected, the equivalent of, I think, $5 million into the one of our state public-private partnerships. We need much more money than that injected into the development of our manufacturing capacity, as does Senegal. Senegal has capacity that can be ramped up. Other African countries, and Egypt, Kenya, and other economies which have the industrial base, such as Nigeria and so on, really need to move on this and move on this fast.
All right, Rehad Desai, thank you very much for speaking to us. Rehad Desai joining us from South Africa with the People's Vaccine Campaign. Moving on, as a global rush for COVID-19 vaccines continues, there are fears African nations could be left badly exposed if richer and more developed nations hoard the vaccines. Now, African nations are banking on a global discussion in Switzerland around the vaccine to change the dynamics of how the continent accesses the crucial jabs. Here is CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy with that report.
The hoarding of vaccines by rich countries has complicated Africa's efforts to secure enough supplies for its population. The price of not solving the vaccine distribution challenge internationally has left many African countries scrambling.
The developed North, which has substantial financial resources, has purchased the largest stocks, while we in Africa are struggling to get our fair share. The painful irony is that some of the clinical trials for these vaccines were carried out in Africa.
According to Duke University's Global Health Institute, rich countries have locked up 60% of the global vaccine supply. Rwandan President Paul Kagame has called for a review and adjustment of social protection systems to fill gaps that have been revealed by the COVID-19 crisis.
The social protection agenda cannot be limited to wealthy countries indeed. In fact, the pandemic has also reminded us of how we are interlinked and how we are interdependent in many ways, so that in one part of the globe, things happening will affect the other part as well. It doesn't matter how rich or how poor we are.
Calls for a people's vaccine seem to be falling on deaf ears as wealthier countries have it their way. The promise of equitable access and distribution disparities of COVID-19 vaccines is feared will only prolong the pandemic unless the world join hands to defeat the deadly and yet invisible enemy. In Africa, many people are still pinning their hopes on the arrival of the COVID-19 vaccines. This year's Davos Forum will play an important role in rebuilding trust and ensuring no one is left behind during the global pandemic. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Let's turn to North Africa now, where Morocco has begun its national coronavirus vaccination campaign after receiving vaccine shipments from AstraZeneca and Sinopharm. And as CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa reports, clinics have been opened at various locations in the country, with citizens aged 75 and above receiving jabs.
Morocco has the second highest number of COVID-19 infections on the continent, and for many people in the country, the vaccination campaign has brought hope that they could soon bring the disease under control.
The official came to my house yesterday and didn't find me. He came again this morning and told me to come get vaccinated. Only good will come out of the vaccine, God willing. One's years are in the hands of God, and so there is no reason to be afraid.
We have started vaccinations for those aged 75 and above. We have equipped the area here for them, put in all the efforts to make things well. We will gradually start opening up the rest of the vaccination centers in the city of Saleh. At this moment, we have moving vaccination centers targeting strategic populations at the front line of the pandemic.
Morocco has received 2 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. The vaccine has been manufactured by the Serum Institute of India. About 500,000 doses of China's Sinopharm vaccine have also arrived in the country. The North African country plans to vaccinate 80% of its population within 3 months. The government also says vaccinations will be available to all Moroccans over the age of 17 at no cost. Wilkista Nyabwa, CGTN.
Now, the Chinese government is discouraging all non-essential travel during the Spring Festival travel rush. Authorities have also introduced new policies to ensure safer celebrations. Zhao Yunfei now reports on local measures in Guangdong province.
Guangdong province is certainly a province, one of the provinces here in China that has a big amount of migrant workers. But what makes this year's New Year special is certainly the coronavirus. There are multiple measures have been carried out across cities here in Guangdong province to encourage people to stay where they work. Here in Guangzhou, the provincial capital, they distribute public transport tickets to commute within the city, and that includes the tickets of metro as well as tickets of the bus. And also in Foshan has sent out vouchers to those people who decide to stay, and those are the tickets including cinema tickets as well as scenic spot tickets. As long as you travel among low-risk areas within China, you have to show the proof of a negative test within 7 days. Now, this is not a measure that forces people not to leave, because given the fact that Lunar New Year reunion is a tradition here in China for thousands of years, local authorities are making it possible as well as convenient for people to travel. For example, the test fee of nucleic acid tests cut by half to 70 or 80 yuan, and that's a bit more than $10 is comparatively cheap.
Meanwhile, the European Commission has authorized the AstraZeneca vaccine for the EU market. Vaccine shots can be used for people over the age of 18, although health experts warn it shouldn't be given to those over 65. But the move comes amid controversy after the company said it will initially only be able to deliver a fraction of the doses promised to the EU due to production problems. Tony Waterman reports from Brussels.
Europe's drug regulator has cleared AstraZeneca's COVID-19 shot for use in people over 18, even as German health experts recommend it not be used in over 65s, saying there's not enough data on how well the shot works for older people. While the agency agreed data was scant, it said it still believed the shot would offer protection.
This expands the range of vaccines available to EU and EEA member states, which will all help to bring the pandemic under control and protect the citizens of the EU.
It's a much-needed affirmation for AstraZeneca's jab and another weapon in the EU's COVID-19 fighting capabilities as member states step up criticism of Brussels' handling of vaccine procurement. But the approval comes as the two sides lock horns over a disruption in deliveries. The EU now expecting AstraZeneca to deliver only a quarter of the 100 million doses promised through March. It wants AstraZeneca to reroute shots from the UK to the EU to make up the difference, and earlier in the day published a redacted version of its contract with the firm, hoping to prove it has claim over the shots. The contract says AstraZeneca must use its best reasonable efforts to produce the vaccine in the EU, and explicitly states that includes the UK. Problem is, both sides disagree on what best reasonable efforts actually means.
Transparency and accountability are important to help build trust of European citizens and to make sure they can rely on the effectiveness and safety of the vaccines purchased at EU level.
Amid the clash and dwindling vaccine stockpiles, Brussels has introduced new export controls, giving member states the authority to block international shipments in certain situations.
The aim is to provide us immediately with full transparency, transparency that until now has been lacking and what Europeans expect.
The controls could affect the UK, Canada, and the United States.
Seen as the light at the end of a very long tunnel, the global battle over vaccines is likely to only intensify as the months drag on, as citizens lose patience with restrictions and as governments grow increasingly desperate to jumpstart their economies. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
Stay with us here on Africa Live. It's time for us to take a short break. Here's what's coming up when we're back. A Dutch appeals court finds Shell Nigeria responsible for oil leaks. And more than 200,000 people flee conflict in the Central African Republic.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography. And a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Admin Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live, Find your voice.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us on Africa Live. Now let's take you to West Africa, where a court in the Netherlands has ruled that oil giant Shell's Nigerian subsidiary is responsible for leaking oil from some of its pipelines in the Niger Delta region of the country. The case is over a decade old. The ruling means Shell will pay unspecified damages as compensation. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza reports from Nigeria's capital, Abuja.
The case between Royal Dutch Shell and Nigerian farmers has been backed by Netherlands environment group Friends of the Earth. It has dragged on for so long that two of the Nigerian farmers holding Shell responsible for the oil spill have died since the case was first filed in 2008. The oil spills occurred between 2004 and 2007 in several villages, including Goy and Oruma in southern Nigeria. The farmers complained that it poisoned their fish ponds and farmlands. Pollution from leaking oil pipelines remains a major problem in the country's Niger Delta region, but the court's decision could pave way for more cases against the Dutch energy company as well as other multinationals operating in Nigeria. Oil giant Shell has expressed disappointment with the verdict, saying it is not responsible. It believes sabotage from criminals caused the spills in the communities. According to the court, the amount of damages will be determined later and the ruling can be appealed at the Dutch Supreme Court. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Now, violence in the Central African Republic has forced over 200,000 people to flee. The UN says post-election violence in December has forced citizens to seek safety. Refugees speaking to the UNHCR recounted fleeing as they heard gunshots. Militias have been fighting the army since former President François Bozizé was ruled ineligible to participate in the December 27th presidential poll. President Faustin Touadéra was announced the winner of the election, securing a second term. Fighting erupted following poll results, leading him to declare a state of emergency.
We're briefing today on the situation in the Central African Republic. As insecurity in the Central African Republic has displaced now more than 200,000 people within the country and in neighboring states in less than 2 months. UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, is warning that tens of thousands are facing dire conditions. Refugee arrivals into the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, have reached 92,000 according to local authorities, and over 13,000 people have crossed into Cameroon, Chad, and the Republic of Congo. Refugees continue to arrive.
Staying with the CAR, where a former Central African Republic Seleka faction commander suspected of war crimes intends to contest allegations brought at the International Criminal Court against him. Mahamat Said Abdelkane was detained and transferred to The Hague last week and also faces charges of crimes against humanity allegedly committed in 2013. The arrest comes against the backdrop of fighting between CAR's army, backed by the UN, Russian and Rwandan troops, as well as rebels from both militia groups who have now formed an alliance with the aim of seizing the capital and overturning December's vote. President Faustin Touadéra was declared the winner of the polls. The Central African Republic has witnessed violence since rebels known as Seleka seized power in March 2013.
What is clear is that as at this date, my client is presumed to be innocent. And if we have possession of all the evidentiary materials, we will arrange for our own witnesses, certain of the witnesses, to testify for the defense.
We have considered all relevant factors, including the need for the parties and the participants to prepare the rights of Mr. Said, especially his right to be tried without undue delay, as well as the current exceptional circumstances due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, the date for the commencement of the confirmation of charges hearing is set for Tuesday, 5th October 2021.
Now, a small Kenyan textiles factory run by a devolved unit of government made news locally when it started making surgical masks and protective gear for health workers. This came at a time when most of these essential items were being imported at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Kitui County Textile Center has now embarked on wealth creation by empowering youth in the area with factory floor skills. CGTN's Nick Mudimba now reports.
The Kitui County Textile Center is the third biggest textile factory in Kenya and the first one set up by a county government in the country. It has rolled out a skills transfer program targeted at training community tailors in industrial garment production. Textiles and clothing account for 12% of total manufacturing value added in Kenya. The center has employed 600 youths who have been trained in garment making.
We have engaged people of the low level, people who have not finished the education cycle in Kenya. The class 8 leavers, the form 4 leavers, and who majorly are not productively engaged in their rural areas.
The 24-hour factory employed the youth who then went through a 3-month garment training course aimed at equipping them with the right skills. It is expected that these skills will help them earn their upkeep in the lucrative garment making market. Empowerment is the main priority here at Kikotek, and 80% of the workers here are actually women. But at the end of the day, the bigger focus is actually to strengthen the economic perspective of this region and the country as a whole. For them, it's all about coming up with quality products that indeed sell Kenya and, of course, sell this county.
This is one of the ways of ensuring women empowerment. But then again, realize that if you look at our unemployed population, most of them are women. And they're the ones who are involved more so in the household, the needs of our households.
With the rise in the demand for face masks and PPEs due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the center has considerably increased its capacity. This has helped create more jobs in the county at a time when many companies across Kenya have laid off workers and unemployment is rife.
We have now enough experience to produce quality garments for the export markets. So we are up in the next 2-3 years. We should be able to produce for not only Africa. Remember, COMESA is duty-free once you export. Just one of the opportunities we are looking at exploiting. The world over, we are looking at the US and other countries that can be able to import clothes from Africa.
The County Textile Center had humble beginnings. It started off as a simple embroidery outfit stitching uniforms before inking a lucrative deal in 2019 to tailor over 6,000 uniforms for government security agencies in Kenya. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Kitui County, Kenya.
Right, well, here's what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya's economy slumps into first recession in 20 years in the third quarter of 2020. And a widening spending gap is set to drive up South Africa's tax targets.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Well, let's kick off the business news here in Kenya, where the economy slid into a recession for the first time in 20 years in the third quarter of 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The National Statistics Bureau says the GDP in East Africa's biggest economy fell by 1.1% during the quarter starting July through to September. Kenya confirmed its first coronavirus infection in mid-March and later imposed a partial lockdown. Shutdowns in key markets such as the European Union and the UK hit the country's main foreign income earners. They include tourism and exports of tea, flowers, fruit and vegetables. According to data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, agriculture, which makes up a third of Kenya's GDP, grew by 6.3% compared with a 7.3% expansion in the April to June period. That was helped by tea production, which was increased 14% into the quarter thanks to favorable weather. The World Bank sees Kenya's economy rebounding to growth of 6.9% in 2021 from an estimated 1% contraction last year. Elsewhere, South Africa may be forced to revise its tax increase targets as its budget shortfall is set to breach wartime levels for a second consecutive year. According to estimates, the budget deficit will reach 11% of GDP in the fiscal year through March 2022. That compares with the government's estimate of 10.1% published in last October's medium-term budget policy statement. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has more now from Johannesburg.
According to a recently released survey, the budget deficit will reach 11% of gross domestic product in the fiscal year to end March 2022.
There are still investors out there that look at South Africa with interest. So we're still getting, investors in our bond market. And what I'm concerned is that government once again will have the ability to kick the ball a little bit further down the road. But the problem with a budget deficit like the one that we're having and the one and one that is growing at the rate that we are seeing is that we will be at a fiscal cliff very soon, and it will catch us unawares if we do not do something about it.
Others are concerned about the interest rate costs on debt repayments.
As the debt pile goes up as a percentage of our GDP, it's also going to mean further rating downgrades. And that's what brings the second thing into play. We're going to see higher and higher interest rates.
The question on everyone's minds is, what will the government do?
We are really hoping to see that government will cut back on their expenditure quite dramatically. But it's unlikely that that would be something that we would see. It might be a slower process than what we actually need. We might get private sector getting involved, out of their own regard and trying to fix the economy, to try and create an environment where business can grow.
I think they are going to try and cut spending and reprioritize it. I think the second thing that they're going to do is look at ways that they can collect more taxes, whether that is looking for more rich people that they think are circumventing the thing, or whether it's increasing taxes.
Government will be looking very closely at a broad spectrum of taxes to attempt to narrow that gap.
We are expecting that they will be increasing taxes in some areas. We don't think, for example, an area such as VAT would be on their agenda. They would rather look at taxes that focus on the richer part of the population, which, to be quite honest, is actually middle class and upper middle class. So we expect to see a couple of new taxes there.
The South African government knows what it needs to do to reduce that budget deficit, but the question is whether it has the political will or not to do what needs to be done. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, like every other economy across the world, Nigeria is also facing one of its hardest times in decades. A plunge in oil revenue and the COVID-19 induced slowdown combined to throw Africa's largest economy into recession late last year. But despite these challenges, policymakers say the outlook for 2021 looks promising and that the recession will be short-lived. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more on that story now.
If current trends are anything to go by, the horizon doesn't look bright for Africa's biggest economy. Nigeria is in a recession and battling a second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Inflation is at a 3-year high of 15.8%. The local currency is still far from stable, while forex still remains scarce. The country's SNL account is weak and government's revenues are depleting. Despite this seeming grim picture, experts and managers of the economy are optimistic things will turn around.
The medium-term outlook for both the domestic and global economies continue to show improved prospects of recovery, supported by the recent moderate uptick in crude prices and increased optimism over the procurement and distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. Available data and forecasts for key macroeconomic variables for the Nigerian economy suggest further improvement in output growth in the first quarter of 2021.
Experts say oil still remains very crucial to Nigeria's recovery and growth. Global oil prices have been stable for quite some time now, and despite OPEC production cuts, the country is compensating for its own share of the cuts with condensate.
This economy requires massive amounts of investment. We will achieve that investment if we are able to get macroeconomic stability. We need a set of policies that are internally coherent and consistent, which enable us to bring down inflation and accelerate growth.
Inflation is indeed a big headache for Nigeria. The gap between inflation and interest rate has continued to widen. Experts believe closing that gap is a priority, and the country's central bank says it is committed to doing so.
We will continue our price and monetary stability mandate, but that must be conducive to growth, because you need to see positive growth in our economy as well as inflation. They must come together. We'll be looking aggressively at what can we do to put in place measures that will stimulate consumer spending, that will ultimately also lead to more facilities for manufacturing companies to agri companies, so that this will help to create employment, stimulate manufacturing output, and positively impact on our GDP.
The central bank has been injecting massive funds into the economy to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on the country. It so far disbursed 2 trillion naira as stimulus to keep the economy running, and it says it is willing to spend more to ensure Nigeria exits recession as soon as the end of the current quarter.
2021 promises to be a better year than 2020. The challenges that we face at the macro level will continue to evolve. The challenges that businesses will face will also continue to evolve. But I am clear in my mind that there are significant opportunities that corporates can and must respond to if they are going to grow.
The country appears to be on the track to recovery, but growth will be a very slow process. Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, data from the Bank of Tanzania shows a massive decline in both volume and value of cleared checks over the last 6 years. This is happening as the banking sector adopts digital payment systems. The value of check transactions in the country has decreased by over 65% from $3.3 billion in 2014 to $1.1 billion in 2019. CGTN's Isaac Lucando has more.
Technology is changing the way Tanzanians are making payments. Digital transactions are contributing to a decline in the number of check transactions in the country.
Check transactions, they are really declining. If you look at from once, just from the 3 years back, 2017 into 2020, you see like a 22% of the check transaction, both in value and volumes, they've actually declined quite significantly. And you see much of the transactions that are migrating to electronic payments. And for the same period, you can see a 21% increase.
The Tanzania Bankers Association says many banks are currently offering mobile banking, internet banking, as well as payments through points of sale, which have reduced the need for checks. It claims reduced costs brought about by digital transactions are benefiting banks and their customers.
The decline of check transactions in Tanzania is reflective of a global trend. It's being fueled here partly by the growing use of mobile money.
Figures from the Tanzania Communication Regulatory Authority show there are currently more than 30 million mobile money accounts in the country. More than 6 million were registered within just 1 year. and convenience appears to be driving the rise in mobile money transactions.
It's quite fast, it's instant. It takes lesser time. Seconds, you just do your transaction. But for check, it's a process. You have to go to find a bank. It has to be opening hours. Yeah, 3 days clearance to take. But if you send your money through your mobile phone, it's instant and very fast. The fund is on the other side.
Countries like South Africa and Namibia have already abolished payments via checks. The growing digital transactions could lead Tanzania down a similar path. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Now, Zimbabwe has been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. As part of measures to curb the spread of the disease, the government restricted movement except for those in the essential services sector. While agriculture falls within this category, sector players have faced challenges in getting their fresh produce to consumers. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has more.
Transporting fresh produce across great distances can compromise the quality of the product by the time it gets to its destination. Clive Nyapokoto founded Shift Technologies to tackle this challenge.
The systems that we have, they are integrated. It's like they are connected to each other. It's an interchain, I can say. So it's from aquaponics, we are saying we are growing vegetables, utilizing fish waste. Unlike where we are saying someone is growing a soil-based system where he's just growing vegetables. Here we are saying fish as well as vegetables. So apart from consuming the vegetables, you're also getting your protein whereby you will be now eating the fish.
Vermi aquaponics is a soil-less growing technique that combines hydroponics with vermiculture. On Nyapokoto's small farm, his cycle consists of worms, fish and plants, all coexisting and feeding into each other.
If you look right now, maybe in relation to COVID-19, garbage collection or waste collection is not that much frequent, and hence you have to see how best you can manage waste within your household. So everything that is biodegradable, that can decompose, we give it to the worms or to the maggots. Then we get production of maggots, which we later on use to feed our fish.
For this Zimbabwean startup, sustainability in meeting the fresh produce demands in this time of COVID-19 does not necessarily mean huge farming land and expensive inputs. It means maximizing on that which is already available. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Time for another short break, still to come on the program. We meet a chef in Uganda making face shields to earn a living.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now, a Kenyan chef based in Uganda is making face shields for a living during the COVID-19 pandemic. Jacob Omondi says the growing demand for protective gear pushed him to make the career change. CGTN's Hilary Ayasiga now reports.
Jacob Omondi designs face shields out of plastic and paper. He's a chef turned craftsman.
I'm feeling more happier because when I make face shields, the person who is producing the trans paper will get his money. The person who is selling elastica is also going to get something small. The boy in Nkrumah Road who is making for me the badges will also get something small. The border person who is going to transport my face shields is going to get something. So me being in that creativity kind of life, so many people are also getting a share out of it.
Omondi employs about 5 people in his face shield business. In a day, they make about 500 face shields. The price tag for each shield is $1.05.
During this time of COVID, we could say that it has been a terrible thing to us as Ugandans, but it was like an obstacle, but we found that an obstacle, we made it an opportunity because we we learned how to make masks and we could get a living.
But the business faces stiff competition from other manufacturers. To keep his business afloat, Omondi markets his face shields in the community.
With the customers, he or she will see that it's hygienic, it's very clear, it's clean. You know, they will feel at home when you're transacting with them.
The Uganda government is urging citizens to follow COVID-19 guidelines by social distancing, washing hands frequently with soap, and wearing masks. And as Ugandan authorities continue to ease restrictions, health workers are also urging people to use protective gears like this one to help reduce infection rates in the country. But they are concerned that some people are ignoring the health recommendations and causing an upsurge in COVID-19 cases.
We just need to intensify our prevention measures. Already people are crowding, people are not wearing masks, they're not taking all the measures. So that is a worry, of course.
Uganda has registered over 39,000 cases and 318 deaths. The hope is that community initiatives like Omondi's face shields can help curb the spread of COVID-19 in the country. Hilary Isiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And it's just about time for us to check in on all the latest from the world of sport. Here's what's coming up. Court of Arbitration for Sport dramatically reinstates banned Ahmad Ahmad as CAF president.